friends and fellow bibliophiles, welcome back to Kat's Novel Adventures. Today I am sharing everything I read in April. April was a fun and relaxing reading month for me. I read pretty much all children's literature. There was one adult fiction book in there, but I was in my happy place all month long and I really felt so relaxed. It was a laid back month for me reading wise, and that's partly because I only participated in 2 readathons. Old School April, which was the focus of the month. I happened to also be a co-host for that wonderful epic nostalgiathon. And then I participated for the very first time in Picture This 2024. In addition, I participated in 2 book clubs, Cozy Cottage as well as FOMO. Now let me talk about my stats for April. I completed 10 books. 3 of them were picture books, and I read half of a book. Of those 10 books that I read, I had 8 5 stars and 2 3 stars. Now let's talk about the book I only read half of. That would be Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I was able to count the half that I read in April for Old School April, so I did get some points for my Silver Snakes team. And I also attended the Cozy Cottage Book Club meeting. We had a wonderful discussion, but I will give all my thoughts and feelings about that book in my May wrap-up. The first readathon I want to talk about is Picture This 2024. This is a month-long readathon celebrating picture books. Y'all know how much I adore picture books, so this readathon was right up my alley. It was hosted by Shelly at Shelly Swearingen and Jack at Spread Book Joy. I ended up only reading 3 picture books, but the 3 books that I read, I absolutely loved. And the first one is Stellaluna. This is by Janelle Cannon. This is a tender-hearted story about a baby fruit bat who is separated one evening when she and her mom are out searching for food. Stellaluna falls into a bird nest that has 3 baby birds in it, and the mother bird decides to raise Stellaluna alongside her babies until she is reunited with her bat mother. Stellaluna is a delightful story. It has charming illustrations, and it really centers around embracing differences, developing friendships, and being brave. Stellaluna, of course, was a reread for me. It was one of my go-to stories that was part of my curriculum when I taught 2nd grade. And in April, I read it to my 1st grade Title I students. They absolutely loved the story. They had a ball with it. In fact, they really enjoyed comparing and contrasting birds and bats. It's also a wonderful mentor text for teaching reading comprehension strategies as well as text structures. It is definitely a 5-star read for me. Click, clack, moo. Click, clack, moo. Clickety, clack, moo. That comes from the wonderful picture book, Click, Clack, Moo, Cows That Type, written by Doreen Cronin and illustrated by Betsy Lewin. This is an amusing story about a farmer with an unusual problem. His cows have discovered a typewriter, and they have written him a note that demands electric blankets, not only for themselves, but also for the chickens. Of course, Farmer Brown is infuriated because if he does not give them electric blankets, they are not going to give him milk and eggs. So he writes his note back saying, no, I'm not going to provide that. Well, then the cows and chickens go on strike until Duck shows up on the scene with an ultimatum. This story is hilarious. I absolutely love reading it aloud to children. Not only did I get to read it aloud to my 2nd grade Title I students, but they got to read out loud to me as well as to their peers. They were working on their fluency, reading comprehension, as well as vocabulary. Ultimatum is a pretty big word for a second grader, but they had so much fun and got really tickled when we read the click, clack, moo part because it repeats quite often throughout the story. We had quite a few fun activities that went along with the book, and they just overall had a great time. Click, clack, moo, cows that type also includes some important messages like effective communication, fair negotiations, as well as respectful problem solving. And I also think it would make a great mentor text for teaching older students about letter writing, persuasive writing, as well as opinion writing. And we cannot forget about the illustrations, which are terrific. Betsy Lewin actually won the Caldecott Honor Award in 2001 for those illustrations. This is a fantastic picture book, and it's also a 5-star read from me. And the last picture book that I read was Two Bad Ants by Chris Van Allsburg. I am a huge fan of his books. He is probably my favorite when it comes to picture books, and this one is terrific. After an ant scout brings back a beautiful sparkly crystal to the colony and presents it to the queen, who finds it delicious, a group of ants decide to go out and bring back some more. Well, they all, except for 2, get their little crystal and go home. The 2 that stay behind go on quite an adventure. This whimsical story really is about making good decisions and facing the consequences when you don't. Van Allsburg does a wonderful job of building suspense with each obstacle that the ants encounter, and I love the illustrations. They are amazing. They show the different perspectives of the settings throughout the story from the ants' point of view. This story is also loaded with a rich vocabulary, which is not unusual for a Chris Van Allsburg picture book. There's also plenty of opportunity for discussion. I think this is a wonderful mentor text to teach children about perspective, point of view, sequencing, making predictions, as well as making inferences. I think that young readers as well as older readers will really find Two Bad Ants a delightful read. In fact, I chose it as one of my host recs for Old School April. And my friend Alicia was one of the participants of Old School April that read Two Bad Ants. Little did she know at the time that she would have her own text-to-life experience when a couple of ants got into her air conditioning unit and caused it to stop working. Unfortunately, she was without AC for 5 days until they discovered the culprits. Her air condition, thankfully, is working fine now, and she is enjoying her air condition because in the South, you need AC. With all that being said, yes, there are some bad ants out there, but reading Two Bad Ants would be a great decision because it is an awesome book. I loved revisiting it, and it definitely deserves 5 stars. In addition to the picture books and the half of Sense and Sensibility, I read a bunch of middle grade books for Old School April, which is a month-long readathon, watchathon, activity-a-thon, epic nostalgia-thon created by my bestie Kelsi at Slime and Slashers. I was so excited to be one of the co-hosts again this year, along with several fantastic booktubers. I had fun participating as well as co-hosting. And so let me share the other books that I read for Old School April. First up is The Mystery at Lilac Inn by Carolyn Keene. This is the 4th book in the Nancy Drew Mystery Series. It follows Nancy and Helen in a canoe on their way to Lilac Inn, where they are visiting their friend Emily and her Aunt Hazel. Unfortunately, the 2 girls have another boating mishap, but are able to make it to Lilac Inn safely. Once they are there, it does not take Nancy very long to realize that Lilac Inn has a black cloud hanging over it, and she is soon drawn into a couple of mysteries that are fraught with danger. I thought the bungalow mystery was intense, But the mystery at Lilac Inn is way more intense and much edgier. However, it does not have the same appeal as the Bungalow Mystery. Of the 4 mysteries I have reread so far, this is my least favorite. First of all, I was a little disappointed with how the mystery at Lilac Inn started. Very similar to the Bungalow Mystery, where Nancy and Helen are in danger on the water in a boat that capsizes. Instead of a motorboat, it's a canoe. I also felt like the storyline was a bit disjointed. There were several plot lines going in a million different directions, and you had a bunch of characters who seemed both unnecessary to tell in the story, and some of them were quite unlikable. I felt like there was so much other stuff going on that you really couldn't focus on the main mystery, which was at Lilac Inn. I recently found out that Carolyn Keene was not a real person, and that there are several writers who contributed to the stories in this mystery series. It almost felt like there was more than one writer writing the mystery at Lilac Inn. Yes, I have high expectations for this series because it is a beloved series of mine from childhood, and so therefore I was disappointed. Now, with all that being said, I love Nancy Drew. I will continue reading the series, of course. Nancy is resourceful, she's smart, she's compassionate and kind. I love her friendship with Helen, and I love that she is willing to help her friends when they're having some kind of a mystery and they need it to be solved. This novel is fast-paced and it is action-packed. I just think it lacks the suspense that you will find in the first 3 novels of the series. I ended up giving it 3 stars. Old School April wouldn't be complete without reading a Goosebumps book, and I chose Go Eat Worms by R.L. Stine. This is the 21st book in the Goosebumps series. It follows the main character, Todd, who happens to love worms. In fact, so much so that he is entering a worm project in the Big Science Expo. The only issue is the worms don't want to cooperate. I personally like worms. In fact, when I was going to school to get my teaching certificate, I did a project about worms for my science methods class. So I like the idea of a horror story involving worms. Not a lot really happens in the story, but I do like the fact that the worms get kind of fed up with Todd's antics, so they want revenge on him. It's not very scary at all, although the ending is a bit creepy. It wasn't one of my favorite Goosebumps books, but it was entertaining enough for Old School April, and I do think kids would enjoy it. I gave it 3 stars. The next book I read was Bridge to Terabithia by Katherine Patterson. This also happened to be the FOMO Book Club's March-April selection. I do not know where my physical copy of this book is. I hope I haven't given it away. I think it might be in a bucket somewhere in my house. So I went ahead and listened to it on audiobook this time around, and I really enjoyed it. Bridge to Terabithia is a 5-star read for me because it is an extraordinary middle grade novel about friendship. I personally love stories about friendship, especially ones about best friends who are deeply rooted by mutual love, admiration, and respect. And Bridge to Terabithia falls in that category. The story follows Jesse Aarons, who loves to draw and has his heart set on being the fastest runner in the 5th grade. In fact, he's been practicing all summer long. Sadly, his dreams are dashed when a new student, Leslie Burks, arrives, joins the races, and beats all the boys. Jesse and Leslie happen to be neighbors, and they end up becoming the best of friends. They spend countless hours in a magical world called Terabithia that Leslie creates. Then tragedy occurs, and it impacts their friendship and the enchanted world of Terabithia. Jesse and Leslie's friendship is the heart of the story. I love these two characters. Jesse is sensitive and shy, while Leslie is mischievous and spunky. Despite their very different backgrounds, they do have common interests. They're both creative. Leslie with her storytelling and Jesse with his artwork. When they're together, there's no judgment. They can be themselves, and they're just work very well with navigating this life together, even dealing with some problems that they have at school. Knowing that they have each other just makes everything much better. Bridge to Terabithia is a touching story, not only about friendship, but also about tragedy and coping with loss and grief. And I don't think it's a coincidence that I reread it. The timing was perfect, at least for me. It felt a little more personal this time around. I've recently suffered a loss and have been dealing with grief. And while it was an emotional roller coaster reading the story, it was also a form of comfort for me. And I'm very grateful for that. Sometimes a book just comes into your life or comes back into your life at the perfect time. It is just exceptionally beautiful to me. In fact, Catherine Patterson won the Newbery Medal back in 1978 for this story. It was also inspired by a real life event in the author's life. In fact, there is an interview between Catherine Patterson and her son David, and it was very interesting. It was very interesting to hear, their feelings and why it inspired Catherine to write the story in the first place. And I'll leave you with this. I did have the opportunity to meet Catherine Patterson many years ago. My friend Catherine Huggett and I got to meet her at an author illustrator presentation that they do every year at one of the libraries in Baton Rouge, and she is a lovely lady. And so I just feel like I have a little bit of a personal connection with her, and I really do enjoy her books. The next 4 books I'm going to share belong to a Fang-tastic series. Yes, I said Fang-tastic, and you'll see why in a moment. But I'm so excited that not only did I read the first book in the series, actually reread it, because it happened to be a host rec by my friend Amy at Amy Noel Reads, but I also continued with the rest of the series, and I read the first 4 books in April for Old School April. So it is all Amy's fault that I fell down this rabbit hole, but I'm very grateful at the same time. So thank you so much, Amy, for recommending Bunnicula, written by Deborah Howe and James Howe. It is an engaging middle grade book with some fantastic furry characters with some really amazing personalities. This is the story of the Monroe family and their 2 pets, Harold and Chester. They leave Harold and Chester at home alone. Harold is a dog, Chester is a cat. They go to the movies one rainy night, and when they come back, they have a bundle. And inside that bundle is an adorable bunny. However, the bunny has fangs and also has some odd dietary habits. And did I mention the bunny's name is Bunnicula because the Monroes went to see a Dracula movie and it was rainy and creepy and he's a bunny. You get the picture, and that's why this is a fantastic series. As I mentioned, this is a reread for me. In fact, this book right here belongs to my oldest son, Barry. I've read it several times, always have enjoyed it, but never went beyond it, which now I could kick myself for it because I love the series so much that I want to own the books in my own personal library. This is a fun read, likable characters. I love Harold the dog. He is laid back. He's our narrator of the story. I love Chester the cat, who happens to be high-strung. He reads horror stories, so therefore he has an overactive imagination. In fact, he's convinced that Bunnicula is a vampire bunny, and that's when he gets in a little bit of trouble. So this story is about not only friendship and acceptance, but it's also about making some bad choices and having to own up to those choices when all the dust settles. It also has some delightful illustrations by Alan Daniel. And oh my goodness, if you decide to listen to the audiobook, what an incredible experience, because it is narrated by the actor Victor Garber, and he is fantastic. I loved it so much. He is so great with all the different voices. I would also recommend getting the book in addition to listening to audio, just so you can see all the great illustrations. It is a 5-star read for me. The second book in the Bunnicula series is Holiday Inn by James Howe. Sadly, Deborah Howe, his wife, passed away a couple of months prior to the publication of Bunnicula, but James Howe went on to write the rest of the series, and I'm very grateful that he did, because like I mentioned before, it is a fantastic series. In this story, the Monroe family are going away for a week. They cannot take their pets with them, so Bunnicula goes to stay with a neighbor, and Chester and Harold are sent to Chateau Bow Wow. Of course, Chester's overactive imagination kicks in, and they get into all kinds of shenanigans and a mystery that develops because of some mysterious disappearances that take place. And of course, Chester thinks that there's some werewolves that are living at Chateau Bow Wow as well. We have some new, unusual, and amusing characters added to the mix. They are the guests at Chateau Bow Wow. Of course, it is a story about friendship and teamwork, and in this case, Chester and Harold have to have a bit of courage and perseverance as they're trying to solve this mystery. I love the witty dialogue. In this particular book, Lynn Munsinger actually illustrates the pictures in it, and they are just as wonderful as Alan Daniels. Victor Garber, of course, is the narrator again for the audiobook and does an excellent job. I'm telling you, how he can make all these different voices is just amazing to me. I really, like I said, it just adds to the enjoyment of the story. But this one was another 5-star read for me. The third book in the Bunnicula series is The Celery Stalks at Midnight by James Howe. What a terrific title. I think it is so clever. In this story, Bunnicula goes missing, and all kinds of white veggies are found throughout the neighborhood. Of course, this freaks Chester out because he thinks that Bunnicula is a vampire bunny. All Harold wants is for Bunnicula to be found and brought home safely, and all Chester wants is to save the town from veggie zombies. The dynamic duo, Chester and Harold, are at it again, trying to solve a mystery, but this time they are joined by Howie, the newest addition to the Monroe family. He is a carefree dachshund puppy who loves to crack jokes. The funny thing is he calls Chester Pop, which drives Chester crazy, as you can imagine, and he refers to Harold as Uncle Harold. Like the last novel, friendship and teamwork seem to be at the core of it. And I'm getting the feeling that friendship and teamwork is going to be the key component running through all the novels in this series, especially now with the addition of Howie. They also need to trust their instincts and face their fears while they're investigating around the neighborhood. They also cross paths with a feisty cat named Snowball. That made for some awkward scenes. This is a well-written story, just like the last two. Clever wordplay. I really love the mystery with a little additional spookiness to it. This novel was illustrated by Leslie H. Morrell, so a new illustrator, third one so far, and the narrator of the audiobook was Victor Garber. Again, awesome. I just really love this story, and I really encourage you, if you have not read this series, to please check it out. Another 5 stars. The fourth book in the Bunnicula series is Nighty Nightmare by James Howe. I just have to tell you, I am so obsessed with this series. I don't know if it's because I have read these books like back to back, And I have just gotten to where I feel like I know these characters because I've been spending so much time with them, or if it's also the addition of listening to it on audiobook, and Victor Garber is incredible. I don't know what it is, but I'm absolutely having a wonderful time with the series. In this story, the Monroe family is on vacation again. They went to their cabin in the woods called Lake Expectations. And this time they took Harold, Chester, and Howie with them. Bunnicula went to go stay with a neighbor. Well, Mr. Monroe and Harold are out in the canoe on the lake, and Mr. Monroe is kind of reflecting on life, and he decides, let's be adventurous and go camping overnight in a tent near the lake. So he goes back to the family at the cabin, and everybody's excited except for Chester, which I'm sure you're not surprised, because he, of course, thinks that's like Friday the 13th vibes or whatever is going to happen, because they would actually be camping overnight on May 5th, which Chester says is St. George's Day. And this is what he says about that. The 5th of May is St. George's Day. When midnight toils, the devil has sway. So, of course, Chester is like not game for going to do this, but of course he does not have a choice because he can't stay at the cabin by himself. So they go on to their adventures, and as they are trying to find a spot near the lake, they meet up with some other campers, 2 guys, and their dog. This is a fantastic story. For being such a short book, at least the shortest one out of the series, it truly does pack a lot of storytelling. It has a terrific setting, mysterious characters, an engaging storyline. The woods have a creepy atmosphere, which really lends to Chester telling his hair-raising tale that could be Bunnicula's origin story. It is suspenseful. It has lots of twists and turns. There's also a surprise ending. Of course, again, we're looking at trusting your instincts and facing your fears, especially with the trio trying to navigate in the woods, which is pretty creepy. This is probably the spookiest of the 4 books I have read so far. Also, there's the importance of perception as well as not judging others, because sometimes things are not as they seem. And I will mention that I really did love the heart-to-heart conversation that Mr. Monroe was having with Harold in the canoe. It was just very, very sweet. Leslie H. Morrell is back as the illustrator of Nighty Nightmare. I love the expressions of the animals' faces in this story. They're just so great. And Victor Garber, again, is the narrator. He is so good. He's added additional voices for these characters. He is just really talented. Even though Bunnicula is not really in the book, Chester's story about Bunnicula and what he thinks is his origin story really does make up for it. This is another 5-star read for me. That's a wrap on everything I read during the month of April. I really did have a joyful reading month. I was very excited to participate in my first Picture This readathon, and of course I was very excited to be a part of Old School April. I love being a co-host, and I love getting up to all the other shenanigans with the activity-a-thon as well as the watch-a-thon. Thanks, Kelsi, for asking me to be a part of such an epic nostalgia-thon. I had so much fun. What about you? Did you participate in Old School April or Picture This? Are you a fan of the Bunnicula series? Because I am, like I said, slightly obsessed with it. Let me know in the comments below. You know I love hearing what you're getting up to. As always, I appreciate you watching. Thanks so much for stopping by. And until our paths cross again, stay amazing and be adventurous.